This is Nice Work. I'm Tyler Lake.
And I'm Kate Young, and I am excited because I get to talk about the epic restoration of the Alexander Calder sculpture, the one that sits outside the IU Musical Arts Center.
I'll bite, Kate. What do you mean by epic?
Well, first off, it's massive. You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a truly monumental undertaking to strip this thing down to the bare metal, make repairs, and then repaint perfectly matching the color, Calder red, and making sure it can last for another several decades looking fabulous.
Okay, I'm intrigued. And Alex talked to choreographer Utam Moses about a dance experience she created in downtown Bloomington a few months back. And poet Divya Victor spins poetry out of the noise of official documents.
Oh, and we check in with a competitive puzzler who can solve a Rubik's Cube before we can get to the break.
Which is right now. All that coming up.
This is Nice Work. I'm Kate Young. If you've spent any time on the IU campus in Bloomington, especially over on the east side where the MAC, the Musical Arts Center, is, you might remember a monumental red steel abstract sculpture right outside the MAC. That sculpture, called Peau Rouge, French for red skin, is by Alexander Calder. It was installed more than 50 years ago. Outdoor art, like this Calder sculpture, is meant to withstand the elements. But that doesn't mean it won't need some attention from time to time. That's where my guest, Katie Chatton, comes in. She's the Director of Art and Cultural Heritage at Indiana University and the Associate Director of University Collections.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to start with if you could just tell us a little bit about the work that you do here.
Sure. So the Public Art and Cultural Heritage Collection is the collection of artwork and objects that kind of captures everything at Indiana University that is not in a museum. So the fountains that you see on campus, the paintings you see when you walk through the Union on all 9 of IU's campuses. So we make our way up to Gary. We head on down to New Albany. We get around the state quite a bit. But it's a little bit of everything. We have some historic houses mixed in there. So it's
wow.
teacups and really fabulous paintings and sculptures like the Calder.
And the Calder is the reason that I've invited you to talk with us today. So often when I come into campus, I am passing by the MAC and the Calder. Mm-hmm. And so one day I saw the scaffolding going up around it, and I was like, ooh, what is going on? So, could you tell us a little bit, just to give us a little background about the Calder itself and just kind of tell us about the sculpture, and maybe what we should do is describe it a little bit.
Sure. Well, it came to IU in 1971 in partnership with the construction of the MAC, the Musical Arts Center. So that construction was completed in 1972, and it was Alexander Calder's last site-specific commission of his life. So, really fantastic that we get to have such a piece here at IU. But the funding for it came from Oscar R. Ewing, who was an alum at IU. And the piece was, like I said, commissioned for that exact site. So it has never been anywhere else. It has been IU's the entire time and kind of envisioned in conjunction with the architecture of the MAC. So very specifically placed and very specifically, the scale and everything was in response to the very much brutalist architecture of the MAC. To describe the piece is an abstract monumental sculpture painted in what I think of as the very famous Calder red. It's a very specific red-orange color, and it is abstract. It's not. I've been asked a number of times as this work has gone on, does it represent anything? Is it meant to look like anything? It's not. It is a direct response to the architecture of the MAC.
And what are the materials?
It is made of steel and obviously paint, but steel.
Mm-hmm. And so it's a large piece. It's like 40 feet high.
It is.
And it's very, has this very kind of sturdy presence, like it's really grounded.
It is.
There's, these visible like bolts and sort of mechanisms that kind of hold it together. It's not all like smoothed over.
No, it's not. There are a number of bolts, and if I had thought about it, I would have brought you the total number because we know that, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But those bolts are, I've learned through this process, very specific to Alexander Calder. They have his initials on them. We thought going into this restoration that we might need to replace a bolt or two, and we didn't end up needing to. But had we needed to, there is a foundry in France that's fabricating his bolts right now. So we could have, which is really amazing. Like, you think about the odds of that, but we actually could have. But I'm grateful we didn't need to. The piece is welded in place. That's the reason that you see the scaffolding and everything. We couldn't take it apart. But those bolts are important in its structure as well. But yes, very visible. There are two different lengths of bolts in the piece holding it together.
So what's happening right now is a restoration of this large monumental red structure on campus. And so I guess my first question would be, why now?
Well, gosh, why now? We've wanted to do this for a period of time. We started identifying rust, corrosion a number of years ago, but a restoration of this scale requires a lot of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, a lot of funding needs to be available. It's not inexpensive to do something like this. And all of those kind of moving parts and pieces, you've got to also have the painters. You've got to have, everybody has to come together at one time. And it took us a minute to get all of those parties involved and then, a plan in place and ready to move. So
when you say a minute, do you mean like a few years?
A few years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of planning.
There's so much planning. I think this started 3 years ago, where we kind of said, okay, we need to do something. But now what? It's like this is larger than anything I've certainly taken on in my professional career. So what's the next move? Mm-hmm. And in that case, our next move was to reach out to the Calder Foundation and say, we've got this piece. We know you're aware of it. Here's what we think it needs. Help us move forward with a conservator that is experienced in this kind of work. What recommendations do you have? What other work has been done? We know that the piece was taken down to metal. By that, I mean the paint removed in 2007. But there's not much documentation around that. So what did that look like? And what does that mean for this restoration work? So that's where we started and, kind of started putting the puzzle together from there. And we knew that the work needed to happen in the fall because of the temperature requirements that we had around the paint.
Yeah, can you say more about that?
Sure. So I guess backing up a little bit, the Calder Foundation has a conservator that they recommend that came out. Her name is Abigail Mack. She's with Monumenta. She's out of New York. She came out. She looked at the piece. Her work really is in these monumental sculptures, and she works very closely with the Calder Foundation, which was important to us to honor, Calder's artistic vision.
Right.
But she came out, she looked at the piece, she gave us a really detailed condition report. And it just so happens that she works on high impact coatings for pieces like this. So it ended up kind of being a match made in heaven once we realized what it was that we really needed. But she brought that very specific expertise to working on monumental outdoor sculpture. Mm-hmm. And that's when, when we started working with her, when she said, we really need to be right around 55, 60 degrees. So, what are we looking at in Indiana? When is that?
Okay, so it's a really specific range. It's not just that you have to get it done before cold weather hits.
Right.
It's that you actually can't do it when
exactly
it's really
right.
hot.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. So, of course, we had to remove the paint. So a certain amount of blasting happened prior to the painting, which is going right now.
So did they remove all of the paint?
They did remove all of the paint, all the way down to bare metal. So it was ended up being a much lengthier process than we even anticipated. The paint, of course, these coatings that go on monumental sculpture, they're meant to be really strong. They're meant to kind of withstand the elements, and but it seems like in some instances they almost bake on.
Yeah.
So what we were seeing, we had some corrosion, some rust, so we thought there was some weakness in those coatings, and really there were in a certain number of areas, but the rest of it was really tight. So we ended up spending more time, that's a very royal the crew, spent a lot of time getting that paint removed, as well as they could, while also being really conscious of the texture of the metal and how much metal we're losing in that process.
Okay, so they're using some kind of a sandblasting process?
Yeah, it is a sandblasting process. So there's a couple different grits that are used in that to make sure that, because there's a lot of tight areas in the piece, a lot of bolts, as you mentioned, those provided quite a challenge.
Yeah, all those little joints and connections are going to be corners and tight places that would be difficult to get the paint removed.
Really, really challenging. The crew that we've got on the job is amazing, but I think even they were like, gosh, this is taking longer than we thought. I think it ended up being 40 days, but they were able to get all of the paint off. But yeah, the temperature matters, and the enclosure is part of that. We wanted to keep the blast media from going everywhere. That's right. Containing that.
Yeah, for safety.
For safety, yeah, and it's just really messy. The mess is inside of there, which is nice. It's keeping campus beautiful. But also, should we need to introduce heat? We did. Today is very cold. That structure is already there. It's already kind of keeping everything contained and allowing us to heat the space.
Wow, so you're having to do some temperature control inside that tent.
We are, because it snapped so cold yesterday.
Yeah.
It's going to pop back up, so we've got that working in our favor. But yeah, we didn't anticipate snow.
Right.
That was not on the bingo card, but here we are. So yeah, this is a multi-layered paint system. So there's a couple of different priming layers and then the top coat, and each of those have different temperature variations that they need to be applied within. So I'm certainly not a paint expert, but I've learned a lot in this process. And, just watching the weather constantly, thinking okay, there's been plenty of years in Indiana where, we're in shorts on Thanksgiving. We need it to stay kind of temperate. And we had really great weather. I mean, I cannot complain. It's been dry. It's been 70 degrees or so for quite a while. But yeah, we are running into a bit of a temperature control moment, but it's nothing we can't handle.
Okay, so the first steps would be getting I'm just talking about the work, not the planning.
Sure. Yeah.
The first steps would be kind of getting all the scaffolding around it, getting a tent over it.
Yep.
And I'm sure that in itself was a process.
It was a process.
And then removing all of the paint, using sandblasting at different grits and so forth. And then the next step is going to be doing some primer coats, and it's paint. It's not like a powder coating.
No, it is paint.
It's paint. Okay, so there's going to be primers applied, and then the final paint.
Final top coat.
And where are you now in the process?
Well, we were hoping to start the top coat today. It's a little too cold, so hopefully tomorrow or the next day the priming is done. The piece is actually white right now. It looks really strange. But yeah, we should be into red this week, hoping to wrap up next week.
Let me jump in here to say that I spoke with Katie Chatton in mid-November of 2025. Since then, they've finished painting and they removed the tent and scaffolding in early December. It is truly a stunning shade of red. Let's return to our conversation. You've mentioned them a little bit, but I wonder if you could talk about the crew.
I can. So, like I said, it really was challenging to kind of get all of the right folks involved and lined up and available and all of those things. But we started with Abigail. She then recommended that we bring in a general contractor. So we went, as she would remind me, Katie, it's not that different from painting a bridge. But there's a certain amount of expertise required on the coatings and the systems and all of those things. But we need somebody that's really used to painting at a monumental scale. So a general contractor was hired out of Indianapolis in partnership with an art services organization out of Indianapolis. So there's kind of an art element and a construction element that has to kind of meet. And that general contractor was who worked with the scaffolding company, the fencing company. The scaffolding company actually ended up, they were the ones that built the tent, something that they'd never done before, but they did it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're also contracting with the painting crew. So it's only two guys, and they're
two guys that are doing
fantastic.
The painting.
Yeah, they did all the blasting. It's a crew of two. And yeah, they're troopers. I think by the time this is over, they'll be maybe a little tired of it, but They'll be glad to see it done. And I think that it's so different from a lot of the work that they do. They tell me about painting these large steel structures in Indianapolis, downtown Indianapolis. This is really kind of monumental work, but a very different industrial type of work. So this is the finishes that we are requiring, the kind of minutia that we're requiring is just a little bit different. They're working with a really high level conservation crew, which is not typical for a painting site, for a construction site. So I think it's been really interesting for them to kind of have this experience, all of us kind of watching from different angles, like, oh gosh, what about this? And oh, why is this? And so I think they're probably used to working around folks that are around this a little bit more. And then this is very different for a lot of the people that are involved.
Yeah. So like what kinds of questions, why this or what?
I just had a whole conversation this morning with them about the tips for the sprayer, because this top coat, the red, is going to be sprayed on. We've rolled to now. And so we were having this whole conversation about pressure and fan size, and I'm learning something new every day. These are not things, I realize I've been painting wrong my entire life, but these are not things that I know a lot about at all. Typically when we're painting sculpture, if again, not me, but when we're working with painters on sculptures, it's often powder coating. That's not unusual, but this is something of this size to be sprayed. Often we're dealing with folks rolling. There's just little things like that they were talking to me last week about, the spitting that happens from the sprayer and the texture that leaves and how we go back and get that off. And so it's been a learning experience. There's also very specific measuring that happens within the painted surface. The coatings are only supposed to be applied at certain mills. And so there's this little measuring device that they put in the wet paint to make sure it's the correct thickness. It can't be too thick or too thin to get the kind of seal that you want. So
wow.
It's just every time I turn around, I'm like, something new, something I didn't understand.
That I would imagine that the temperature and humidity and everything would affect that as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
And so it's not just once it's sprayed, it's actually the paint itself and its viscosity or whatever.
Yes,
and
exactly.
How,
Yeah, it can only exist in its container for 2 hours before it's not usable anymore. So there's all sorts of timing that has to be met. That, and then, there can only be so much time between the first and the second and the third and the fourth coat. That it's all very measured at such a high level of coding. So I've learned, like I said, I've learned a lot, but it's been really interesting and really fun. And it's exciting to know that the system that we're working with and towards is going to preserve this piece for generations. We refer to it as a generational treatment.
So is this the first time that a restoration has happened to it since it's been built?
No. So in 2007, we know it was taken down to the metal. I wasn't here then, so I'm not sure what, how that went or what exactly, who or any of those things. But that is one of those things that we're really grateful for, that because there was lead paint at that point. So that remediated the lead, which is amazing. We didn't have to mess with that this time around. But it was important because of the corrosion and the rust that we bring it back down to the metal this time. But we hope that the system that we're putting in place is going to be one that it's not going to need to be taken back to the metal for decades.
The whole, just all of the specifications and all of the work around doing the actual restoration of a piece of this scale is just really mind-blowing to me.
It is. Yes, it absolutely is. I didn't realize that I was getting into a construction project essentially when we jumped into this, because so often we're working directly. It's just, me and a conservator, and we're figuring out what needs to be done and we're doing it, right? It's very simple. But this is not. This is incredibly complex. And it's proven to be a bit of a moving target because there are so many specifications that have to be met in order for things to happen the way that they need to happen. And at this point, we've gone to such great length to make sure that this is a generational treatment. We've got to hit it.
Yeah, you're not just going to be like, if we're off a couple degrees, it's not going to matter. And it's no, you got to be in that temperature range.
Yeah, at this point, nothing less than perfect will do. So here's hoping. We're going to hit it. It's going to be beautiful when it's done. I am excited to see this. We will be the first people to use this paint in Calder Red. So it's exciting to understand, a brand new coating that's going to, we're working with the Calder Foundation to make sure that the hue is right. And it's Alexander Calder's grandson is working with them right now. And he was actually the one that signed off on the color. So that's pretty neat. Yeah.
Wow.
You gotta get that red orange just right. So it's really exciting to understand kind of what that means in art history. I mean, I'm coming from, a fine art background, and just the thought of working on a piece with such impact to our art history is kind of amazing. It's very important to IU, but my gosh, his last site-specific commission of his life, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, to match that color, it's not like you could take a sample from the piece that was out there, because it was out there in the weather and it had faded. It changed. And so, yeah, that does sound like a challenging part of the process.
Yeah, I think it'll probably look a little different to people because it had been faded for so long.
Yeah,
that it's gonna feel a little bit different. But it's gonna be great. We're really excited to see it back to its perfect Calder red.
And you had also said that Abigail Mack worked on the development of the coating.
Mm-hmm. She did. Yeah, she actually works with the United States military. This coating is actually used on their planes and tanks and things like that, because they also require a high-impact coating. So it has been used by the military in other colors, I think black predominantly. Mm-hmm. But we're the first to use it in red, which is really exciting. So yeah, she's been working really closely with us. She's going to be here later this week, take a look at things. But she's been the perfect partner because she's so familiar with Calder's work. She has painted a number in the Midwest, which is helpful. She's had a couple others that were welded in place, which is our situation. So she kind of understands through experience all of the different elements that we're facing, the weather. So yeah, it's been really great to have her on board.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, you said you've never worked on something quite at this scale before. What are some of the other restoration projects that you can just mention, like a couple?
Oh, sure.
Fine. And yeah, just what's involved. And
yeah, well, on the Bloomington campus, it's a lot of bronze work, as you can, I'm sure, imagine. We have, I wish I could tell you off the top of my head how many, but a number of dozens of bronzes. So that is a lot of consistent washing and waxing and making sure that those have the protective coatings that they need. So if we do see vandalism or we see something like that, we've got a coating on there that can make that easily, washed, fixed quickly and easily taken care of. So in this campus, yes, it's a lot of bronze work. We do have a couple of fountains that, always provide a little extra challenge. Water always introduces a little extra challenge. At IUI, we've got a fountain similar to Showalter here. Both have bronze work within them. So, And then on some of the regional campuses, we do deal with a little bit of painting. We've had a couple of pieces, like I said, recently powder coated. But it's very typically bronze work for us just because the university has so much of it. Yeah. And then, outside of that, there's a lot of two-dimensional work that, paintings that require consistent conservation or cleaning, restoration, upkeep. We have very large collections of old oil paintings, T.C. Steele's work from 100 years ago that, over time, we've gotten a lot of them kind of back to stable, which is the goal. And if you walk around campus, you'll notice most things are covered with a glazing. That's very intentional to kind of preserve that work. Artwork in public spaces, you run into a lot of kind of strange, unpredictable circumstances. So just, keeping things as protected and as safe as we know how, so that as conservation is costly. So avoiding that as much as we can, putting things in the best case scenario out in public so that we don't have to go into conservation too often. Conservators are also, they're few and far between. There aren't that many folks in that line of work. So the couple that we work with often, the processes are slow and they've got long lines of paintings coming from different museums. And
so they're not IU employees.
No.
So there are people that need to be hired from outside.
Yeah, we work with vendors. Yep, exactly right. Because you need the specialty that that you need when something like that happens. So it's again a matter of finding the right folks at the right time and getting everybody involved and ready to go when it's time.
Yeah, and it's so different from because these are all pieces that, like you said, they're out in public. They're in these environments. They're not in the protected, ideal conditions of a museum with the lighting and the temperature control and all of that. And so yeah, they're subject to a lot more.
Yes. We can't have eyes on them every day. I think last I looked, we had artwork in over 213 buildings. And I mean, it's impossible. Our little staff, we rely on the facilities folks to keep an eye on things and let us know if something's funny or if there's a leak or, just anything. Sometimes, like I said, we see vandalism or whatever it might be. And that's, part of, I had to learn when I got into this role that, you have to let go of a little bit of control. You can't, this isn't a situation where you can make sure that everything is okay all the time. You have to put things out there in good faith. We use security hardware. We're using the best housings that we know how in those spaces and trust that the public will enjoy them and respect them.
Yeah. Why do you think that's important to have that work out there? Like, could you talk a little bit about that, your thoughts about that? Like, why not, these are really valuable works and they should be protected and let's get them back in the museum so nothing bad can happen to them.
Right. It's kind of interesting because there is a little bit of that. I'm trained, my degree is in museum studies, so I'm very much trained to think about things in that very security and protection, kind of, I don't know, it's just a different way of thinking about how you share things with the public. And when I started in this role, I didn't attend IU, so I didn't understand how much artwork was just in public. And when you say in public, it doesn't necessarily even mean it's behind a locked door at night. I mean, some of these places are open late into the evenings. So there's a certain degree of, gosh, I don't know, you just feel a little nervous, a little anxious about that.
There's a risk.
There absolutely is. And I think that it was risk versus reward, right? When you think about someplace like the IMU comes to mind because it is open late and it's huge. There's all sorts of different places you can get to where, maybe no one's paying attention but that's also a place where tens of thousands of folks walk those halls every day. And we have a real opportunity to expose members of our community to artwork that they wouldn't get to see otherwise. And, like I said, having come from kind of a museum training background, we study a lot about what it means to walk into a museum or a gallery space and how uncomfortable that can be for people. It can be very intimidating. It's almost like you feel like someone's going to ask you if you like it and you're not going to know how to respond to that. But if you're just walking down the hall to get a slice of pizza and you see something that you like, it feels a little bit safer to walk up to that and engage with it, read the label, and maybe the next time you walk past to get a slice of pizza, you take another look. And all of a sudden you understand something. And you didn't have to feel nervous about it at all. You were just on your way to and from lunch.
Right. Or maybe you have a conversation with the person you're walking with and you're both interacting with
Exactly right. And I think that is so important because depending on, maybe I come from a small town that didn't have a museum. I had parents that drug me to those places. You don't end up in this work by chance. But there are people that you certainly understand where it was very intimidating to walk into an art gallery. So bring the art gallery to them, right? Allow them to have a minute. And also, I mean, the time it requires, if you can catch someone's eye on their way to get their lunch, what better time, right? Yeah. And so I often will get, voicemails or phone calls from alums who will say, I visited campus and I just wondered, I used to sit outside, Ballantyne Hall, room 3033, and eat my lunch, and I would be looking at this portrait of this woman across the way, and I just wondered where she was. I it's been 30 years, but I really enjoyed looking at that particular painting. So it's moments like that where you realize, gosh, the thing that is hanging across from the lecture hall in Ballantyne Hall it's making a difference to someone who is sitting there every day and eating their lunch. So I think there's something to be said for allowing those pieces to be viewed while you're eating your lunch and not intentionally entering a museum.
Yeah, just allowing people to have that familiarity because it's in the everyday spaces that they inhabit. It's not in a specialized environment.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And it becomes meaningful to them sometimes just because it was there, which is really, really wonderful. So I have quickly learned through this work that what we do is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to be able to share these things with folks in the IU community.
Well, thank you so much, Katie, for talking with me about this. And yeah, it sounds really, really fascinating.
It's fun. We're really lucky.
That was Katie Chatton, Director of Art and Cultural Heritage at Indiana University and the Associate Director of University Collections. If you're in the area, you can check out the newly restored sculpture by Alexander Calder in front of the Musical Arts Center at IU Bloomington. Peau Rouge is sporting a fresh coat of Calder red. You can see photos on our website, ipm.org/nicework. I'm Kate Young, and this is Nice Work.
A few months ago, I went to an outdoor performance. Ordinary Pilgrimage started on the lawns around the Monroe County Courthouse in downtown Bloomington. Dancers moved to the sounds of the traffic and improvised music. Then they led us to an art gallery where two dancers improvised while a third performer poured water between ceramic vessels. It ended on the lawn outside the Monroe County History Center. The performers laid on their backs and held blocks of limestone in the air. Ordinary Pilgrimage came out of a creative entrepreneurship grant that the Indiana Arts Commission gave to Utam Moses. Utam teaches dance at IU and at Windfall Dancers, and her goal is to bring more dance into the community. Lately, she's been working with older dancers, and she uses a practice called authentic movement. That was the basis of Ordinary Pilgrimage. I invited Utam and Noni Daniels, she's one of the dancers, along with Courtney Jones, a poet who also worked with the group, into the studio to help me understand authentic movement.
Authentic movement is a dance practice about allowing and unearthing often like subconscious or memories or anything that needs to come out. And the kind of arrangement is there's a witness and there's a mover, and the mover has their eyes closed for the entire time. So it's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So you're being witnessed. So it's a practice of being authentically vulnerable while also exploring like themes. Like as we practiced over time, certain themes would come back consistently for specific individuals or certain movements. And we as a group got to see those movements develop or notice when a new, completely different theme would emerge. And
I can imagine that I'm just thinking about the closing eyes part and how that must really help. You know, when we think about dance, we're thinking about, I think about a studio with big mirrors. And so we're like extremely self-conscious of like what we're doing. And also thinking about doing it for an audience and like how it's going to turn out. And it seems like this authentic movement thing is very much about going inward. So what is the effect then of the witness?
Yeah, I am realizing, and I've had some insight, that the witness holds a container. It creates a different kind of rare space for something to emerge. So there's a sense of permission that comes when you're being witnessed, but you're not being asked to perform, where something can emanate, but it doesn't have to be like shown. And I think that that's one of the most deeply intimate ways of interacting. Like we often have that in our homes. So what is it?
Right, the
to
way
like,
we pick up on something from a partner or someone we're close with, even if they're not saying something.
Yeah. And especially when your partner is being deeply generous, because often when we're even witnessing or having a conversation with someone else, we might be thinking of how we're going to reply or judging. And the practice of authentic movement is to kind of let go of those, like that mind story as much as you can. You're trying to like hold a different kind of deep listening space. So it's a practice that we, might try to do in our everyday lives, but the authentic movement space gives us a really clear way to practice that way of moving in the world.
So is the witness responding in any way afterward, or is it really just the person who's moving knows there's a witness, and that creates a certain kind of container.
Yeah. In the framework of authentic movement, everyone writes right after moving. And then there's a sharing. And usually the mover shares first.
Okay.
And then the witnesses share.
Oh,
and
cool.
I think when I see it, it's more exquisite than most performance on stage, because there's a sense of this, the depth of presence that obviously most performers want to achieve, but sometimes I think in actual performance, technique masks that presence. Technique can be like this like film that keeps you from the human that is on the stage, or a character. Even the technique itself holds a kind of value system character that creates the kind of the distance, the critical distance between the performer and the audience. And so when you're moving in this practice of authentic movement, you're kind of stripping away all of those masks, and so many synchronicities emerge. Like you start to see this kind of like super consciousness that we're probably all a part of, but we don't actually get to witness it. But in the authentic movement space, it's just like both people have their eyes closed, but there's these moments where it's like the choreography you wish you could do, but your logical mind could never achieve it, because it's some kind of deeper relational, questioning the self in a space that's shared. And so like synchronicities of people like starting the same movement at the same time, rising at the same time, changing their facings at the same time, or like just aligning in some kind of poignant contrast that you just couldn't I couldn't, as a choreographer, imagine it, because it's something deeper. It's something more emergent than the logic of like, I'm going to try to make this portray this. Like, it's not a telling, which is part of what makes it so beautiful.
Usually we have two dancers and two witnesses, or more.
Right. So I think the witnesses are going to have one experience of it because they're involved in the practice. I'm curious to, as you bring these kinds of practices into like public performance, and also so that people can just get a sense of what an audience might experience, I wonder if we could, maybe Courtney, if you could describe your sense of what an audience experiences.
Sure.
Or experienced at this particular performance.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to speak directly to being a kind of audience, too, because I was introduced to this practice throughout our rehearsals and practices together. And something that was really beautiful, both as the witness and the mover, was like, you're using light and color all of a sudden, and sound. And there is this like push-pull between your body and all the other bodies, and the ground and the grass and the sky. So I think both as a witness and a mover, it's really beautiful to watch all the other senses like sort of come alive. And something for me specifically that kind of came up in the witnessing aspect was when we were finished with one of our practices together, I was sharing with someone like my experience of their movement. And I said something like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of when you ask your parent about what it was like when you were a child. So like, for example, when I was the mover, I was moving, and then we'd gather back together and everyone was like, oh, it was like you were doing this and you did that and your body moved with the sky. And it's like I had some sense of that, but I had a totally different experience. So I guess what I'm trying to name is that like, there was this embodied reality that was so in tune with the sensual experience and these other sensings, that don't rely on our normal sensing, which is very visual. But then to like share that experience with the witnessers, like it was so bizarre to hear them tell back, what they saw from your body that was slightly different. So to me, it brought up this feeling of like, oh my God, that's what it's like when an adult or an elder tells you, oh, when you were a child, you did this. It's like, oh, I was there. Yeah, I remember that, but I have a different memory. I don't know if that means that the witnesser is in like this different consciousness, or maybe the more common consciousness, and the mover is more in this like embodied reality, because the minute you turn off your sight with your eyes closed, you tap into such a different sense of place and being.
It feels like the practice is almost more important than the performance.
I think you're right. That was my question before the performance was, will the audience enjoy it as much as we do? I don't know. I think that the audience, if they listened and if they got it, were able to take it all in as much as we did. So cool. I think that maybe they got as much as we did.
Yeah.
Just not for as long a time, because every time we went to practice, we got more. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
That was Utam Moses, who led Ordinary Pilgrimage, a public dance performance in June of 2025, along with dancer Noni Daniels and poet Courtney Jones. Improvised music from the performance was by Nate Sassoon and Julian Douglas. I'm Alex Chambers, and this is Nice Work.
Welcome back to Nice Work. I'm Kate Young.
And I'm Tyler Lake.
So Tyler, do you ever think about all the dense, esoteric language you find in official documents?
Not lately.
Well, poet Divya Victor does, and her collection Curb deals with navigating all that paperwork in our complex immigration system. Producer Eddie Stewart spoke with her during a recent visit to Bloomington.
It is a Thursday, and no one out in this long street looks like your mother. So you go home, rack yourself in form I-130, knit a nest with a ballpoint pen, limn your ken inside a placeholder, smooth your limbs into a square to beg for a place for your first space, her.
That was poet Divya Victor, reading the poem First Petition from her award-winning book Curb to a rapt crowd at IU Bloomington's Gail Karch Cook Center for Public Arts and Humanities in the fall of 2025. The Form I-130 referenced in the poem is a U.S. immigration form, also known as Petition for an Alien Relative. It's the first step in a years-long process that American residents take to bring their loved ones to the country. The poems in Curb focus both on the bureaucratic hurdles that immigrants to America face and the threat of violence against them. Many of the poems in Curb document the assaults and murders in public spaces of Indian Americans and Indian immigrants. They describe in sharp and vivid detail moments from the deaths of 5 South Asian men killed by white supremacists. Much of the language in the poems comes from what Victor calls concrete media. Documents like trial transcripts, interviews with police officers, and clips of dashcam or surveillance footage. In writing Curb, Victor took inspiration from 20th century poet Charles Resnikoff. He wrote a book-length poem called Holocaust, based on court testimony about Nazi death camps. Victor sees these bureaucratic documents as a kind of noise that needs a poet to make meaning out of it.
I think the poetic practice that I'm most interested in is in actually stripping, drawing, pulling from that noise and making song. It's just my way of paying attention to the noise. I don't think we should shut ourselves out from it. I think we should actually curate and create a very selective and well-informed attention to the noise, so we can hear some of the melodies that are coursing through it.
Curb was first published in an edition of 30 handmade artist books made by Victor's collaborator Aaron Kowick. They featured ink rubbings taken directly from sidewalks and curbs. The project took form following a conversation with Victor's mother 9 weeks after Victor gave birth to her daughter. Her mother had an insight about being an Indian immigrant in the U.S.
It was the first time we were away from the noise of the domestic, and we were out in public, and it was a kind of stroll. And in the rhythm of the stroll, she said, "Since you asked, yes, I am afraid all of the time. All of us are all the same to all of them." And I just sort of memorized it. It landed with such clarity to me. In order for me to really think of the poetry of the present, I had to take my mother's fear seriously and not scoff at it, not dismiss it, not think I can outrun it, not call her paranoid, for one.
The book is dedicated to 12 victims of violence. Victor doesn't know any of them personally, but says she doesn't need to be directly part of their lives to be connected to them.
My survival has already been wrapped up in theirs, and our social failure to commit to their survival affects mine in the future.
Curb is a testimony of the pain that violence can inflict on individuals and their communities, but it shines with moments of tenderness as well.
It is a Thursday, and suddenly she walks through the passport photograph you white stapled at the edge of a petition to anchor her we to your migrating heart.
For Nice Work, I'm Eddie Stewart.
Thanks to Eddie for that story, and I'm happy that we also get the chance to share work from student producers on this show.
Absolutely, Kate. And now we have a story from one of Alex's students, Joe Ringer, who talked to a cuber who can solve a Rubik's Cube in just a few seconds.
Sounds great. Let's listen.
You've probably seen one before, a bright, blocky cube, all colors and squares. Some people can line up one side, others spend minutes twisting and turning, trying to get it right. But for Aiden Halloran, it's different. He moves the cube faster than I can even follow. He talks about algorithms, patterns, and shapes I can't begin to even understand, and somehow it all makes sense to him. Aiden's a part of Indiana University's Speed Cubing Club, where solving under 10 seconds is just average.
My name is Aiden Halloran, and I started solving Rubik's Cubes about 11 years ago when I was in 4th grade, and I found my dad's old Rubik's Cube in my basement, and I've been competing competitively for about 8 years, so almost that entire career. Yeah, I found my dad's old Rubik's Cube, and it's one of those like 1970s like Rubik's brands one, and I brought it up to him, and I was like, hey, like is this yours? And he was like, yeah, so I used to solve it in high school. And he told me that his fastest time was 30 seconds. So like I was pretty competitive, and I was like, well, this seems pretty interesting. Started just like turning it around and kind of like what everyone's done, where you like just try to solve one side. And I was like, okay, I got to beat my dad's time. Like I'm going to show him like I'm better than him. I can do that. What got me into it was like wanting to beat my dad's time, but very like quickly and early on, I realized like that didn't keep me staying, obviously. Like it was the nature of solving it and like how fun it was, and like the different, techniques and algorithms, like the learning aspect of it that I really liked. But when you solve it for the first time, it's like really satisfying just seeing it like all come together. And I feel like every time you solve after that, you're kind of chasing that same feeling. Even most recently, like a year ago was kind of the last time I really competed and gave it like my full effort. And pretty soon after, like this past summer, that's exactly why I got burnt out. It's just like I felt like I was driving myself insane doing the same things over and over again. And the better you get too, it takes more and more effort for less and less results. So when you first pick up Rubik's Cube solving and you first start competing, you can practice an hour a day and get a lot better, pretty substantially better. But when you start getting into like the high level solving and you're getting into like the seconds, the amount of effort it would take me to bring my average from 8 seconds to 7 seconds is thousands and thousands of hours. It's not entirely like chess, where you can talk to a chess player and you could say, you did this competition and you played this opponent and I really liked your opening, and they'll walk you through the entire sequence. I remember that for solves that are special to me. The only actual solve I can remember exactly what I did was when I got a state record. I sat down and he lifted the cube cover, and so then you have 15 seconds of inspection to look at the puzzle. And I still remember the shape. The shape was called right 4-2. It sounds like jargon, but to me that's a pretty exciting shape to get because it's solved in 4 turns. I laid my hands down on the timer, and then when I lifted them up, I did the 4 turns that I had predicted. And the second step, OBL, which is orient both layers, I got good kite, which again, doesn't sound like much, but to me it was pretty exciting. It was a 3-turn solution, so I did those. And then the final algorithm was already oriented for me. I just had to do the execution. And so it was a total of 8 plus 3, 15 turns. So it was a 15-turn solution. And like that's one of the solves where I can literally picture it in my mind. I know if I really, really practiced, I definitely could not only like get the Indiana state record again, but I could also probably achieve another like all-time goal of mine, like since childhood, is to be a top 100 in the world rankings. So like right now I'm 213th, and I know that like it would be hard. It would take like thousands of hours, but if I did it again, I could probably break into the top 100.
You've been listening to Nice Work, a production of WFIU, WTIU, and Indiana Public Media. You can find us at ipm.org.
This episode was produced and edited by Tyler Lake. We get production help from Danny William, Holly Wilkerson, Carl Templeton, Eddie Stewart, Leo Pies, Jillian Blackburn, and Jonah Ballard.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Alan Davis. Additional music from Universal Production Music. The executive producer is Eric Bolstridge. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Nice work, Tyler.
Nice work, Kate.